The drive into Millhaven always does something strange to the air. It gets heavier somehow, thick with pine and red clay and something older than either of those things. Something I never had a name for until I was old enough to understand that some places hold their opinions about you like a closed fist. I rolled down the window anyway. The radio found a country station the way it always does out here. Like the dial remembers the frequency even when I don't. I hadn't been back in 14 months. My father's 60th birthday felt like the kind of occasion you don't refuse, no matter what waits for you on the other side of it. The town looked smaller. It always does. The water tower with the faded Millhaven Wildcats logo, the Piggly Wiggly with the cracked parking lot, the Methodist church where my grandmother used to sing in the choir. I passed all of it and felt the specific ache of loving something and outgrowing it at the same time. I pulled into the Hampton Inn on Route 9, the nicest place in town, which wasn't saying much. My father had reserved a block of rooms for out-of-town family. The birthday dinner was at Hargrove Hall, the old converted tobacco warehouse downtown that people rented for weddings and anniversaries and the occasional quinceañera. My stepmother Diane had planned the whole thing. She'd been planning it for 8 months. She mentioned this every time we spoke on the phone, which was less and less frequently as the date approached. I changed out of my travel clothes, pressed my dress, and sat on the edge of the hotel bed for a moment longer than I needed to. I knew what was waiting. I had known since Christmas 2 years ago when I'd overheard Diane on the phone in the kitchen, telling her sister that I'd burned out during my residency, that I'd cracked under the pressure, that Chicago had chewed me up and spat me out. She said it with the particular satisfaction of someone who had predicted it would happen, who had, in fact, needed it to happen. None of it was true. But I hadn't corrected her. I don't know exactly when I made the decision not to, but at some point I simply stopped. Let the story circulate. Let Millhaven believe what it wanted to believe. The people who mattered knew. The people here didn't need to. I drove to Hargrove Hall with the windows down. The venue looked beautiful. I'll admit that. Diane has an eye for decoration that I've never been able to dismiss, much as I've tried. White bistro lights strung across the exposed beams, tall centerpieces of white hydrangeas and eucalyptus, my father's old photographs enlarged and framed along the brick wall near the entrance. Him at 22 in a baseball uniform. Him and my mother on their wedding day, before she got sick. Him holding me as a newborn, looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days and didn't care at all. I stood in front of that last one for a while. You actually came. My cousin Bethany appeared at my elbow with a champagne flute and a look of cautious warmth. We'd grown up close. We grew apart during my training years, not from any conflict, just from the sheer gravitational pull of different lives. She'd stayed in Millhaven, married a contractor, had 3 kids. I was glad to see her. Of course I came, I said. Diane said she wasn't sure you'd make it. Bethany said it lightly, not maliciously. She was reporting what she'd heard. I said I'd be here. Bethany nodded, glancing around like she was checking for something. She's been telling people you know how she is. She doesn't mean any real harm, I think. She just talks. I did know how she was. I'd known since I was 12 years old, and my father brought her home for Sunday dinner, and she looked me over with the careful assessment of someone deciding what category to put me in and settling on one that has never quite fit. "Where's Dad?" I asked. He was near the bar with his old colleagues from Millhaven High, where he'd taught history for 31 years. He looked well. He'd lost a little weight, gained a little gray. When he saw me, his whole face changed in a way that made the drive worth it, made the 14 months of absence feel like a solvable problem. He hugged me the way he used to hug me when I was small, both arms, nothing held back. "You look tired," he said quietly, pulling back to look at me. "I'm fine, Dad. You always say that. Because I'm always fine." He laughed and kept his hand on my shoulder for an extra beat, the way he does when he's saying something he doesn't have words for. I've always been able to read him. He has never been able to hide anything from me, which has been both a gift and a kind of grief over the years. Diane found us 2 minutes later. She was wearing a navy dress that suited her, and she knew it. She kissed my cheek with the efficiency of someone completing a task. "You made it," she said. Not unkindly, just flatly, in a way that left no room for warmth. I said I would. She tilted her head slightly. "You look pale. Are you eating enough up there?" "I'm eating fine." "She drove all day," my father said, with a mild note of correction. "Of course," Diane said, as though this explained everything about me that had ever disappointed her. She drifted away toward the caterers, and my father watched her go with the expression he's worn for 15 years. A particular combination of loyalty and resignation that has always broken my heart a little. Dinner was set for 7. By 6:30, Hargrove Hall was full. My father's former students, his fishing friends, Diane's extensive network of church and garden club acquaintances, cousins I hadn't seen since my grandmother's funeral. The room had the specific energy of a gathering assembled by someone who wanted to impress as much as celebrate. I was at the family table, between Bethany and my Uncle Roy, who is mostly deaf and easy to sit next to for that reason. I ate the salad and listened to the room and let conversations wash over me without requiring much of me. It was during the main course that it started. Diane's friend Patricia, a woman with blonde highlights and strong opinions, was talking to the table about her son's career in commercial real estate, something about square footage and market trends. I was cutting my chicken and not particularly present. "Of course," Patricia said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "Not everyone's career path goes the way you planned. That's just life, isn't it?" I set down my fork. It wasn't directed at me, technically, but it was for me. I understood that immediately. Diane, across the table, appeared to be very interested in her risotto. "I think things mostly go as planned," I said pleasantly. "It's just that the plan changes." Patricia blinked. Of course, that's very healthy." She turned back to the table and resumed talking about her son. My father had heard all of this. He was looking at his plate. Later, near the cake table, I was standing alone for a moment when Diane appeared beside me. "You don't have to be sensitive about it," she said, keeping her voice low and conversational, like she was offering advice to someone who needed it. "About what?" "You know, people are curious. Small town. They remember you as the one who was going to be a big doctor in the city." She paused. "It's hard when things don't work out. No one judges you for it." I looked at her. "I appreciate that," I said. She nodded, satisfied. "You should think about coming home. There's a good GP practice opening up near the high school. I mentioned your name. You'd have to start over, more or less. But, Diane," my Aunt Carol said, appearing from somewhere, "they need you at the dessert station." Diane pressed my arm once and moved away. I stood at the cake table for a moment. I was not going to explain. I had made that decision a long time ago, and I was not going to unmake it tonight. Not here. Not for her. But something had tightened in my chest. Not anger. Closer to exhaustion. Hargrove Hall had 2 event spaces, the main hall where my father's party was, and a smaller adjoining room called the Magnolia Room, typically separated by a set of double doors that tonight were propped open, presumably for ventilation. I hadn't paid much attention to what was happening in the Magnolia Room. A corporate dinner of some kind, I'd assumed. People in business attire, name badges on lanyards. I had slipped out to the corridor near the restrooms for some air when I heard someone behind me say my name. Not the way family says it. The way a colleague does. I turned. Dr. James Whitfield was walking toward me from the direction of the Magnolia Room, pulling a lanyard over his head with one hand and reaching out with the other. He was 60-something, silver-haired, with the upright posture of someone who has operated for 40 years and kept every vertebra in line. He was the chairman of cardiothoracic surgery at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. He was also, I realized as my brain caught up with my eyes, one of the reasons I had chosen this specialty. I had listened to a lecture of his during my second year of med school. I had cited his research 11 times in my own published work. "I thought that was you," he said, genuinely pleased. "What are you doing?" And he glanced around wherever we are. "Millhaven," I said. "My father's birthday." Of course. He shook my hand with the warmth of someone who means it. "We're here for the State Cardiothoracic Symposium. Rented out the back room. I almost didn't come, I hate these things, but Margaret insisted." He paused. "We were just talking about your paper, the one in JTCVS last month. Henderson won't stop talking about it. He thinks it changes the approach entirely. I had published a paper in the Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery 6 weeks ago. It had taken 3 years to complete. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone in Millhaven. "That's very kind," I said. "Kind? It's accurate." He tilted his head slightly. "Are you at Northwestern now? I know you moved around a bit." "University of Chicago Medicine," I said. "I've been there 4 years." Surgical director? Deputy chief of the cardiothoracic division, I said. As of January. His eyebrows went up and he smiled. January. And you're just telling me this now? You should have told the department. We would have. He shook his head, amused. January. I'll be damned. I was aware, distantly, that we had drifted back toward the main hall. The double doors were still open. The birthday party was full and loud and close. How's your father? Dr. Whitfield said. Is he here tonight? He is, I said. I'd love to meet him. Any man who raised you, he said it without fanfare, the way someone states a fact that doesn't require elaboration. I turned. The main hall was perhaps 40 feet away. The nearest tables were my father's table, the family table, Diane's table with Patricia and the others. They were all looking at us, not because of anything dramatic, because two people had walked in from the corridor mid-party and voices carry. Dr. Whitfield didn't seem to notice or care. He was scanning the room with the calm confidence of a man who is comfortable everywhere. Which one is he? He asked. I pointed. My father was standing near the center table, champagne glass in hand, talking to one of his old students. Dr. Whitfield walked over with me. The room didn't stop. It wasn't that kind of moment, but I was aware of the tables we passed, the conversations that quieted slightly as they do when something unexpected moves through a room. Sir, Doctor, Whitfield said, extending his hand to my father with genuine warmth. I'm James Whitfield, Vanderbilt cardiothoracic. I was just telling your daughter we've been following her research for years. You should be very proud. Deputy chief at her age. At that institution, he shook his head with what looked like authentic admiration. That is not a small thing. My father looked at Dr. Whitfield. Then he looked at me. He already knew, of course. He had always known. I'd told him everything, just not loudly, not for the room. He knew about the position in January. He'd sent me flowers, actual flowers, a bouquet of yellow tulips, with a card in his handwriting that said only, I always knew. But standing there in the middle of his birthday party, in the town that had raised both of us, with his old students and Diane's friends, and the woman who had been quietly telling everyone for 2 years that I hadn't amounted to anything, he straightened up very slightly. The way he used to stand when he was proud of me and trying not to make a scene about it. I know, my father said to Dr. Whitfield. I've always known. Dr. Whitfield stayed for 15 minutes. He had champagne with my father and talked about fishing. Of all things, because my father mentioned the lake, and Dr. Whitfield turned out to have fished all over Tennessee. I stood beside them and mostly let them talk, which felt right. This was my father's night. It had always been meant to be his night. When Dr. Whitfield excused himself back to his symposium dinner, he shook my hand again at the doors. Send my regards to Henderson, he said. And congratulations, Deputy Chief. He said it the way people say a title when they want you to hear it properly. Not performatively. Just cleanly. I thanked him and watched him go. When I turned back to the room, things had shifted in the small, atmospheric way they do when information has moved through a space without anyone officially announcing it. Patricia was talking to Diane with a particular focus. Bethany was looking at me from across the room with an expression I hadn't seen from her in years, something uncomplicated, just open, like a window that had been stuck and finally gave. My Uncle Roy, who was wearing his hearing aids tonight as it turned out, leaned over and said, Did that man just say you're a chief? Deputy chief, I said. Hot dog, he said, and went back to his cake. I stayed until 10:30. I helped Diane wrap the extra desserts in foil and carry boxes to her car because my father asked me to and because it was the right thing to do regardless. She didn't say much. She handed me boxes and I stacked them in the trunk, and the night was cool and smelled like pine, and neither of us felt the need to fill it with words. At the car door, she paused. You should have told people, she said. Not an apology. Something else. Something that was trying to look like concern but had a different shape underneath. I did tell people, I said. I told my dad. She looked at me for a moment. He knew? He's always known. She nodded very slowly, opened her car door. Happy birthday to him, I said, and meant it. My father found me near the photo wall at the end of the night, when most of the guests had left and the catering staff was quietly disassembling things around us. I was looking at the photograph again, him holding me as a newborn, the one where he looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He stood beside me without saying anything for a while. We've always been able to do this, stand somewhere together in silence without it being uncomfortable. I got that from him, I think. The ability to let a moment be what it is without rushing to put language over it. Deputy Chief, he said finally. Dad. January. He said it like he was testing the weight of it. You called me in January and you said, Dad, I have some news. And you told me. I was in the truck on the way to Home Depot. I remember. I pulled over, he said. I sat in the parking lot of a Waffle House and I cried a little bit. He said this without embarrassment. I didn't tell you that. You sent flowers. Yellow tulips. Your mother's favorite. He was quiet. She would have given you so much grief about not coming home sooner. I laughed, which surprised me. The real kind, the involuntary kind. She would have. I agreed. He put his arm around my shoulder the way he used to when I was a kid, walking me to the car after late practices, after long days, after hard things. The specific weight of a parent's arm that tells you without any words that you are not alone in whatever you are walking through. You never have to prove anything to anyone in this town, he said. You know that. I know. Not to Diane, not to Patricia, not to any of them. I know, Dad. He nodded. We looked at the photograph together for another moment. That was some doctor, he said finally. The Vanderbilt man. He's a good one. He knew your research. He cited some of my work, yeah. My father made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite something else. A sound of quiet enormity, the way people sound when something they have believed privately for a long time is confirmed by the world. Come fishing with me before you go back, he said. Sunday morning. Early. How early? 4:30. Dad. 4:45. And that's my final offer. It's my birthday weekend. I looked at him. He looked back at me with the particular stubbornness of a man who has outlasted a great deal and intends to outlast more. 4:45, I said. He squeezed my shoulder once. We stood there a while longer, in the emptying hall, under the bistro lights that Diane had strung beautifully across beams that smelled of old tobacco and thyme. The photographs of him lined the wall 22, 30, 45, and in all of them he was looking at the camera with the same expression, steady and full of something that doesn't have a simple name. That was the part I would carry home with me. Not Dr. Whitfield's handshake. Not the way the room shifted. Not any of it. Just my father pulling over in a Waffle House parking lot in January, alone in his truck, crying a little. That was the thing that mattered. Sunday morning was 40 degrees and still dark when I got to the lake. My father was already there. 2 rods set up, thermos of coffee on the tailgate of his truck. He handed me a cup without a word. We walked down to the dock in the dark, and sat and let the lake do what lakes do in the early morning, which is exist so completely and so quietly that everything else feels briefly optional. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Around 6, the light came up pink over the tree line and the water turned from black to gray to a pale, clear green. A heron landed at the far end of the dock and considered us with the ancient indifference of herons, then decided we were acceptable and stayed. My father caught 2 bass and threw them back. I caught 1 small bream and threw it back. We drank all the coffee. At some point, he said, "You're doing good work out there." Not "you've done good work," present tense. Ongoing. "I'm trying," I said. "No," he said, with the gentle certainty of a man who taught history for 3 decades and knows the difference between trying and doing. "You're doing." I looked out at the water. The heron lifted off eventually, slow and deliberate, banking west toward the tree line and disappearing. The lake settled. Somewhere across the water a loon called, and then it didn't. I thought about my mother, the way I always do near water, because she loved lakes. I thought about the first day of medical school, the parking garage, standing beside my car in the dark, telling myself the same thing I've told myself before every hard threshold. You are ready. You have always been ready. I thought about 3 years of data, of late nights, of the paper that now sat in a journal that James Whitfield carried in his briefcase. I thought about how none of it had required anyone's permission. "I know you do," I said. "I've always known you do." My father nodded once, the way he nods when a conversation has arrived where it was going. The drive back to Millhaven was quiet. The radio found the country station again. The water tower passed on the left. The Piggly Wiggly, the Methodist church. I left after lunch. He walked me to my car and hugged me in the driveway and held on for an extra second, the same way he has since I was a child, the way that says everything he doesn't have to say out loud. "Don't wait 14 months, he said. "I won't. I mean it. I know you do." He let go. I got in the car. He was still standing in the driveway when I turned out of the street, and I watched him in the rearview mirror until the road curved and the houses closed in behind me, and all I could see was the road ahead, opening out into the long, flat stretch of I-40, leading back north, leading back to the life I had built in the place where no one needed to be convinced of anything. The radio played something I didn't know the name of. The air got lighter as I put the miles on. I drove with the windows down until I couldn't feel Millhaven anymore. Then I rolled them up, turned on the heat, and went home.